something to think about.
Shalom and greetings. We welcome you to this week's Sabbath message. This week's Sabbath message is entitled Attention to Details. Attention to details. It is pretty safe to assume that we have all heard the saying that the devil, Hasatan, is in the details. The devil, Hasatan, is in the details. Well, today we will once again move from just knowing to understanding about details and see if there's any truth to this statement. So let us go to the book of Psalms, the 33rd chapter, verses 4 through 11. The scripture reveals and shares here that Yahweh is the full sum of the details. Say this again. Scripture reveals and shares that Yahweh is the full sum, no remainder, of the details. From his words to his works. Because the details are the truth. Let's say this again. Because the details are the truth. So let us read Psalms chapter 33, starting in verse 4. It reads, For the word of Yahweh, the Lord, is right, and all his works are done in truth. Let me read this one more time so we don't miss this. It's saying, for the word of Yahweh, the Lord, is right. His word is right, and all his works are done in truth. Psalms 33, verse 5. He loveth righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of the goodness of Yahweh, the Lord. Psalms 33, verse 6. By the word of Yahweh, the Lord, are the heavens made. By his word were the heavens made. And all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as an heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. Psalms 33, verse 8. Let all the earth fear Yahweh, the Lord. That word fear means reverence and revere. Let all the earth fear Yahweh, the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Psalms 33, verse 9. For he spake, Yahweh, for he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. It didn't move. Psalms chapter 33, verse 10. Yahweh, the Lord, bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. Yahweh bringeth all the knowledge of the heathen to nothing. He maketh the devices of the people of none effect. They have no effect. Psalm chapter 33, verse 11. The counsel of Yahweh, the Lord, standeth forever. Let me say this again. The counsel of Yahweh, the Lord, standeth forever. The thoughts of his heart to all generations. We see that his word is right all the time, and his works are done in truth. In the Hebrew, the word truth used here is defined in the Jacinius Hebrew County Lexicon as, these are the definitions for truth: firmness, security, faithfulness in fulfilling promises. So his works are done in truth. His works are done in firmness, in security, faithful that they will be fulfilled. By Yahweh's words, the heavens and all the hosts were made. The scripture instructs all of the earth to stand in awe of Elohim, for he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. His counsel stands forever. Forever. He crushes and breaks the counsel of all others. The word details is not used at all in the scripture. But let us understand why Yahweh Elohim encompasses all the details. He encompasses all the truth. In the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, one of the definitions of the word detail is, so this is one of the definitions for the word detail. Now get this, lock in on this. This is the definition for detail. Extended treatment of or attention to particular items. Extended treatment or attention to particular items. So notice, the secular definition of the word detail requires extended or prolonged treatment or handling of, or attention or focusing and applying the mind. Attention or focusing and applying the mind to particular items. The definition for detail. Scripture just shared with us in Psalms chapter 33 verses 4 through 11 that there is nothing that Yahweh is not responsible for. There's nothing that we know about, that we experience, that Yahweh is not responsible for. All of the earth should stand in awe of Yahweh. This makes him, the details, the truth. So with that being said, all the world, all should be constantly or extendedly, going back to that meditation, the definition for details, all should be constantly or extendedly meditating on the handling and treatment of the truth that Yahweh Elohim is. So because he is the details and the truth, all the world should be constantly or extendedly meditating on the handling and treatment of, as well as applying their minds, focusing and attentive to the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim, who is the details, the truth. All of us should be constantly or extendedly meditating on the handling and treatment of, as well as applying our minds and focusing and attentive to the commandments and instructions. That's what we should be constantly, extendedly meditating on and applying our minds and focusing on, the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim, because he is the details and the truth. Allow us to grow and move from just knowing to understanding the words, truth, and detail. And that Yahweh Elohim is all of the details combined. The complete truth. So, how then, understanding this, how then can the devil, Hasatan, be in the details? So let us just go back here again so we're on the same page. As we are growing and moving from just knowing to understanding the words truth and detail, and that Yahweh Elohim is all of the details, Yahweh Elohim is all of the details combined, Yahweh Elohim is the complete truth. How then can the devil, Hasatan, be in the details? With what we have come to understand thus far, it enables us to see that the devil, Hasatan, is not and cannot be in the details. The only thing that the devil, Hasatan, is able to do is to get as many people as he can not to practice the definition of detail. So he's not in the details, but what he does is gets as many people as he can not to practice the definition of the detail, not to constantly, extendedly meditate on the handling and treatment of the commandments, not to apply their minds and focus and attentive to the commandments and details. That's what Hasatan can do. He attempts to distract and redirect as many as he can from the definition of detail. Let me say this again. He attempts to distract and redirect as many as he can from the definition of detail, to distract and redirect as many as he can from constantly or extendedly meditating on the handling and treatment of the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim, as well as distracting and redirecting all that he can from applying their minds and focusing and attentive to the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim. The devil, Hasatan, wants to cover up the truth. He wants to cover up the details by attempting to eliminate them and then replace them with his lies. This isn't me saying this. Let's turn to the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 44. This is the devil, Hasatan's mode of operandi throughout the scripture, from the very beginning, and it has not changed up to this current time. So let us read the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 44. It reads, "Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth." He was a murderer from the beginning, and in addition, abode not, did not live in the truth. And the reason why? Because there's no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, though, get this what it says. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own. For he is a liar and the father of it. Now, let us go to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 26 through 28. So let us be fully cognizant and aware that there are consequences for not adhering to the detail, the truth, as well as rewards for adhering to detail, the truth. This is one of numerous examples throughout the scripture that gives both the consequences and the rewards. So let us read Deuteronomy. We're going to start in chapter 11, verse 26. It reads, "Behold, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse." This is Yahweh Elohim speaking to the children of Israel. "I set before you this day a blessing and a curse." Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 27. A blessing if ye obey the commandments of Yahweh the Lord, your Elohim, which I command you this day. A blessing if ye obey. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 28. And a curse if ye will not obey the commandments of Yahweh, the Lord your Elohim, but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day, to go after other gods which ye have not known. It does not take long for the first example of attention to detail to be seen in the scripture. It doesn't take long. So let us go to Genesis, the very first book in the King James scripture. Let us go to Genesis chapter 2, just the second chapter of the very first book. And we're going to read verses 16 through 17. And then we're going to go to Genesis chapter 3, the very next chapter, starting at the very first verse, 1 through 6, and then we're going to pick back up at verses 22 through 24. Scripture has a common theme, and that is that Yahweh Elohim always gives clear commandments and or instructions. Gives clear commandments and or instructions. So let us first read the very lucid and clear commandment given in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 reads, and Yahweh, the Lord Elohim, commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Now, there's no ambiguity in this passage of scripture. Not only does it command what the man could do, but also what he should not do, and gives the consequences of not adhering. No ambiguity in this passage of scripture. Now, let us examine Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, and see the devil, Hasatan, cover up the truth, the details, by eliminating them and, get this, replacing it with a lie. We just read about that in the Gospel of John, chapter 8:44. He's the father of it. So we're going to read in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. We're going to see it in action. Hasatan cover up the truth, the details, by eliminating them and replacing it with a lie of himself. So let us read Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. It reads, now the serpent, we've talked before, this is Hasatan. We've talked about this in Revelation chapter 12, that it gives it different names. This is just not calling him the devil, it's calling him the serpent. Now the serpent, Hasatan, was more subtle. He was more subtle than any beast of the field which Yahweh, the Lord Elohim, had made. More subtle. He said unto the woman, Hasatan here, the serpent, yea, hath Elohim said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Genesis chapter 3, verse 2. And the woman said unto the serpent, unto Hasatan, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. Genesis chapter 3, verse 3. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim had said, ye shall not eat of it. And Eve goes off on another tangent here, adding stuff. Neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. Genesis chapter 3, verse 4. And the serpent, Hasatan, said unto the woman, now get this, this is where he covers up the truth. He covers up the detail and replaces it with his lies. So, and the serpent, Hasatan, says unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. Wait a minute. We read in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17, he says, actually it's in 17 specifically, that the day you eat of it, thou shalt surely die. Hasatan, remember, this is what he does. He's not in the details. He can't be. But he wants to replace it. He wants to eliminate it by replacing it with his lies. This is where it starts. We can see it right here. The truth was, if you eat of that, you shall surely die. Hasatan comes along and says, I don't want you to pay attention to the details of the truth. I want to redirect you, distract you, and give you a lie. So here in Genesis 3:4, it says, and the serpent Hasatan said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. For Elohim doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So he's replaced it now with his lie. So it's no longer the day that you eat of that tree, eat of the fruit of that tree, thou shalt surely die. He's redirected. He's distracted you into now not paying attention and extended and prolonged attention and handling of his commandment. He's redirected you. He's distracted you to now pay attention to his lie, which is, you shall not surely die. But when you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. This is it firsthand. I'm not making this up. This is what the scripture shares with us. And when the woman, Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Now, this passage of scripture starts out by letting us know that the devil, Hasatan, is more subtle. He's more subtle. He's more subtle than any other creation on earth. And we've talked about this in other teachings and other passages and other messages, because he is from the first earth age. So this word subtle in the Hebrew, this word subtle means crafty or wise. He's more crafty or wise than any other creation on the earth. Notice how the devil, Hasatan, leads with a question. This is key here. This is his modus operandi. We've got to understand this and see this. So notice how the devil, Hasatan, leads with the question in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. It says, if we go back to Genesis 3:1, and it says, and the serpent, Hasatan, said unto the woman, yea. So yes, hath Elohim, he's asking this, has Elohim said? He's asking a question here. Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. So we must get this. And notice how Hasatan, the devil, leads with a question about the truth. Because that was the truth. That was the details that he told Adam. Ye shall not eat of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You should not eat of it. That's the truth. That's the details. But notice how he leads with a question about the truth, about the details. This is basically the same modus operandi the devil, Hasatan, uses today. So let us think about how all of the things that are in opposition to scripture today started with first questioning whether or not the scripture is correct. Think about this now. About all of the things that are in opposition to scripture today, they started first with questioning whether or not the scripture is correct. Some examples that immediately come to mind are Christmas and Easter. Questioning, are the feast days that Yeshua and the disciples celebrate still appropriate to be celebrated today? I don't know about you, but I've heard that like that was for the Old Testament. That's not for us today. Questioning whether or not it's still appropriate to celebrate today. Questioning the detail where it says these shall be celebrated forever throughout your generation. Questioning the truth. This is why it is of tantamount importance to not just know, but understand the scripture. By only allowing scripture to validate scripture. As we called out earlier, the devil, Hasatan's objective is to cover up the truth, details, by attempting to eliminate them and replace them with his lies. We called this out earlier. We see here that the devil, Hasatan, immediately tries to cover up the truth, the details, by redirecting Eve in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Immediately. That's Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. That's their first conversation. He immediately goes to cover up the truth and the details by redirecting her. Hasatan tells her a lie. He immediately redirects her to his lie, hoping to get her to constantly meditate on the handling and applying her mind, focusing and attentive to something other than Yahweh Elohim's commandments and truths, something other than Yahweh Elohim's details and truth. Unfortunately, the devil, Hasatan, was successful in his objective. Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 reveals this. With this being brought to our attention, we should take pause and consider how much of the things that are not scripturally based. Let me say this again. With this being brought to our attention, to us paying attention to the details, we should take pause and consider how much of the things that are not scripturally based should we be receiving from anyone or anything. Think about that. Now, let us read Genesis chapter 3, verses 22 through 24. Genesis chapter 3, verse 22 reads, "And Yahweh, the Lord Elohim, said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever." Genesis chapter 3, verse 23. "Therefore Yahweh, the Lord Elohim, sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken." Genesis chapter 3, verse 24. "So he, Yahweh Elohim, drove out the man. And he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." Now, what we just read is the first occurrence in Scripture of Yahweh Elohim's consequence for not adhering to his commandment, not paying attention to detail. This is the first occurrence. The scripture reveals the consequences for Eve and Adam because Eve did not dismiss the devil, Hasatan, immediately. Once he was speaking in opposition to Yahweh Elohim's commandment. If someone comes to us and speaks in opposition to Yahweh Elohim's commandment, we should dismiss them immediately. This is not putting the total blame on Eve, though. We've clarified in other messages, classes, and in the book, The Beginning of Scriptural Truth by His Servant, the woman was up against the angel of light, Hasatan. So she had a formidable foe. I mean, it still doesn't make it right. But some of us, we're not going up against the angel of light or Hasatan. We're just going up against some of his foot soldiers. that they're bringing us opposition to Yahweh Elohim's commandment, and we actually are taking time to consider what they're saying. Are we today any different? If we continue to allow ourselves to be exposed to things that are in direct opposition of Yahweh Elohim, will we not be led away and receive the same consequences? Let us go now to 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 17 through 19. This scripture shares that both the righteous and the unrighteous will be judged. Everybody's going to be judged. So let us read 1 Peter. We're going to start in chapter 4 and verse 17. For the time is come, get this, for the time is come that judgment, get this, must begin at the house of Elohim. So the judgment starts, it begins at the house of Elohim. He's talking about those that profess and proclaim to be his servants, to be his disciples, his workers. That's where the judgment starts. So Peter goes on to say, and if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of Elohim? So even those of us that say we're obeying the gospel of Elohim, we're still going to be judged. And as we know, none of us live up to the mark. So Peter's like, well, wow, if we're going to be judged, what shall be the end of them that obey not the gospel of Elohim? Let us continue. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 18. And if the righteous who are being judged scarcely be saved, the righteous who are saying that, who are committing to following the gospel of Elohim, he's saying if the righteous scarcely, just barely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 19. Wherefore, let them that suffer according to the will of Elohim commit the keeping of their souls to him. Commit to the attention to details in well-doing, as unto a faithful creator. Notice that even those that are righteous will scarcely be saved. So the scripture does not promote or infer that there is room for anything other than constantly, extendedly meditating on the handling and treatment of, as well as applying our minds, focusing and attentive to the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim. Notice the righteous will scarcely be saved. So scripture does not promote or infer there's room for anything other than attention to detail. Let us now go to 2 John chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 10 through 11. Understanding this, we should immediately dismiss. Understanding this, we should immediately, as we said before, dismiss, send them on their way, anyone or thing that questions scriptural truth. Immediately dismiss it, send it on its way. So let us read 2 John chapter 1, verse 10. We're going to start there. It says, if there come any unto you and bring not this doctrine, just this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Elohim speed. So don't even let that person into your house. Don't even wish them the speed of God go or what. Just dismiss them. And it goes on to explain why. 2 John chapter 1, verse 11. For he that biddeth him Elohim speed is partaker of his evil deeds. So even if you don't agree with him, you say, well, okay, will God be with you or whatever. If you do that and send them out, you are a partaker of their evil deeds. Just dismiss them. I can't even discuss anything with that. And I don't wish you, I'm just dismissing you. I'm sending you on your way. Once again, we see clear instructions. Once again, we see clear instructions, and that there are consequences for not paying attention to detail. There's no ambiguity here in what he's saying in 2 John chapter 1, verses 10 through 11. Clear instruction. And it's clear that there are consequences for not paying attention to detail if you don't adhere to it. You'll be a partaker of that evil deed, an accomplice. Let us now go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 13 through 22. Now, we've examined the consequences for not paying attention to detail, but Scripture also gives examples of rewards for paying attention to detail. Once again, we will see the common theme throughout the Scripture of Yahweh Elohim giving clear and concise instructions. So let us read Genesis chapter 6, verse 13. I'm going to start there. And it reads, "And Elohim said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth." Now, get this. Genesis 6:14. This is still Yahweh Elohim speaking to Noah. He's telling him clear, specific details, instructions. "Make thee an ark of gopher wood." Gopher wood. Not any kind of other wood, cedar wood, oak wood, gopher wood. "Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch." He's telling you, don't just do it on one or the other, both in and out. Genesis chapter 6, verse 15. "And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. The breadth of it 50 cubits. And the height of it 30 cubits. Genesis chapter 6, verse 16. "A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof." Don't set it in the front or set it in the back. Set it in the side thereof. "With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it." Genesis chapter 6, verse 17. "And behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die." Genesis chapter 6, verse 18. Get this though. "But with thee will I establish my covenant." Okay, it's the first covenant here. "And thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, thy wife and thy wife's sons with thee." Genesis chapter 6, verse 19. "And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female." Genesis chapter 6, verse 20. "Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive." Genesis chapter 6, verse 21. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So he's telling them, this is what you need to do. You need to get food to take with you, for you and for all the animals and the people that are going on. Genesis chapter 6, verse 22. Thus, this is where this is the crux of all the matter. Get this now. Get this. Focus in. Yahweh Elohim's been talking to Noah all this time, and it goes on to say, Scripture tells us, thus did Noah. This is what Noah did. According to all that Elohim, paying attention to all the details, according to all that Elohim commanded him, so did he. He paid attention to the details. This passage of scripture shares with us that Yahweh Elohim was going to destroy all flesh from the earth. Yahweh Elohim instructs, clear instructions, Noah to make an ark, and then gives him detailed instructions on how to make the ark, as well as what and who should be brought aboard the ark. Notice what the scripture says about Noah. It says all that Yahweh Elohim commanded him, all the details, so he did. He paid attention to the details. Let us now go to 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 9. Scripture shares not only in Genesis that Noah and all that were on the ark were saved because of Noah's attention to detail. This passage of scripture shares Yahweh Elohim's track record regarding judgment and his grace to his righteous followers, those that pay attention to detail. So let us read starting with 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. 2 Peter 2:4 reads, "For if Elohim spared not, he didn't spare the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment." Okay, so let's pause here for a second. It's 2 Peter 2:4. This first example is addressing the angels that did sin. So keep your fingers here and turn now so we can explain what happened, these angels that he's talking about here. So keep your finger here in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, and then turn to Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. So we can identify who these angels are that he's talking about that he did not spare, that had sinned. Even the angels must pay attention to detail. Even the angels must pay attention to detail. Yahweh Elohim imposed consequences on those angels that did not pay attention to detail. So let us read Revelation chapter 12. We're going to start in verse 7. Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 reads, "And there was war in heaven." There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels, Michael the archangel and his angels, fought against the dragon, Hasatan, the devil, the serpent. And we're going to see where that term comes from. We can use these terms interchangeably. Fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. So Michael and his archangels fought against the dragon, Hasatan, and the dragon and his angels fought back. Revelation chapter 12, verse 8. "And prevailed not." So Hasatan and his angels prevailed not. And so it goes on to say, "Neither was their place found anymore in heaven." So those angels were all in heaven. It tells us in Revelation 12:7, the war was in heaven. That's where the war took place. But Hasatan and his angels prevailed not. Semicolon there. So we get ready to give a different thought here. And it goes on to say, and so since they did not prevail, it says, neither was there a place found anymore in heaven. So let us go to Revelation 12:9. "And the great dragon," that's what it's called. So this is again why we can say we use these terms interchangeably. We see in Revelation 12:7, it calls it the dragon. "And the great dragon was cast out." But it goes on to tell you some other names for the great dragon. That old serpent that we see in Genesis chapter 3, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. So again, it's telling you this is who it's talking about. They're all the same. It goes on to say, he was cast out into the earth. But get this, and his angels and his angels. Now remember, in 12:7 it says Michael and his angels, but it goes on to say later that the dragon fought and his angels. So Michael and his angels, they're not included in this. It says that in 12:9, and the great dragon was cast out. That old serpent, who's also the great dragon, called the devil, who's also the great dragon and serpent, and Satan, which is all the same, which deceived the whole world. He, that one person, they can't all be three because he is a singular pronoun. So he, all of those are the same, was cast out into the earth. But get this, and his angels were cast out with him, those angels that fought with him. So notice that it calls out only those angels that were with the dragon, the old serpent, the devil, Satan, were cast out of heaven and down to the earth. Those were the ones that did not pay attention to detail, because there was no more room, it says in Revelation 12:8, anymore. There was no place found any longer for them in heaven. So they were cast down. Those that did not pay attention to detail were cast down to the earth. Now, so again, I just wanted to explain that 2 Peter 2:4, those angels that he said he spared not in 2 Peter 2:4. This is the angels that he's talking about. So now let us go back to 2 Peter chapter 2:5 and let us read. 2 Peter 2:5, it says, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. So he says he saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, but bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Those that did not pay attention to detail. This example addresses Noah and his direct family that were saved by Noah's attention to detail, and his direct family, and through Yahweh Elohim's covenant with Noah and his descendants. Now remember, this was first alluded to in Genesis chapter 6, verses 18, and then validated in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. But understand that only Noah and his family were saved on the ark because of Noah's righteousness and attention to detail. Now, I'm not going to digress too much, but it's important that we understand Noah and his family, because as we've talked about in other messages, other teachings in the book, the beginning of Scriptural Truth, Volume 1 by his servant, we talk about there were other people that were also saved on the ark, but not their families. It was just two. But Noah and his family, Noah, his three sons, and their wives, because Noah was righteous and paid attention to detail. So now let us go and pick back up at 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. This second example, so that's the first example. This second example also shows Yahweh Elohim showing grace and mercy to those that pay attention to detail, but judging those that do not, saving just Lot and destroying all that are wicked and unlawful. So let us read 2 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 6. It reads, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow. Those cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, we're all well aware of those cities and what they represent. Unrighteousness, wickedness, unlawfulness, making them an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly. So he's giving you an example of those that after should live ungodly, like this is what's going to happen to you. He's giving you an example so you don't go that route. So that's the judgment, the condemnation, the consequence. But let us read 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7. It says, and delivered just Lot, just meaning a just man, just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. It just vexed him, and it was vile to him. Their filthy conversation, the wicked. So he condemned and he overthrew the wicked, the unlawful, the unrighteous Sodom and Gomorrah in 2:6, but in 2:7 it said he delivered just Lot. We remember the story when the angels came and took Lot out before he condemned those places. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 8. For that righteous man dwelling among them, for that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, the third example. So this is the third example. Yahweh Elohim shares, he will keep the just, those that pay attention to detail, and will judge all the unjust for not paying attention to detail. So let us read now 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. Yahweh the Lord knoweth how. He knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation. It's no problem with him. He don't have to figure it out. It tells us real clear, again, clear, concise instructions, clear, concise what's going on. It tells us Yahweh the Lord knoweth how. He knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations. That's not a problem. But he also says, it goes, and he also knows, because this is saying what he knoweth how to do. Yahweh the Lord, he knoweth also, it says, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. He knows how to do both of those things. It's no problem. He knows how to do both of those things. He knows how to deliver the godly out of temptation. He knows how to reserve the unjust, the wicked, the unlawful unto the day of judgment to be punished. In both the Old Testament / covenant and the New Testament / covenant, the scripture shares the rewards of and the consequences of not paying attention to detail. Both the Old Testament / covenant and the New Testament / covenant, by both Yahweh Elohim and the Messiah, warn the called out ones, the ecclesia, about being deceived. So let us first go to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 13 through 17. And then we're going to go to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, verses 4 through 5, and also the Gospel of Luke chapter 21, verse 8. But we're going to start with reading Deuteronomy chapter 11. We're going to start in the 13th verse. And it reads, and it shall come to pass, if ye shall hearken, get this now, if ye shall hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day, to love Yahweh, the Lord your Elohim, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 14, that I will give you, if you do all of these things, this is one of those Boolean if-then statements, if you do all of these things, then it says, Deuteronomy 11, verse 14, that I will give you the rain of your land in his due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn and thy wine and thy oil. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 15, and I will send grass in thy fields for thy cattle, that they mayest eat and be full. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 16, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Because get this, he's telling them, he's warning them to not be deceived. Because in Deuteronomy 11, 17, he's getting ready to tell you what happens when you are deceived. So let us read Deuteronomy 11, 17. And then the Lord Yahweh Elohim's wrath be kindled against you. And he shut up the heaven, and that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless ye perish quickly from off the good land which Yahweh the Lord giveth you. Yahweh Elohim instructs the children of Israel that he he instructs the children of Israel that had been called out of Egypt to pay attention to detail and not be deceived. Don't take on that other opposition to his word. Dismiss it. We see here once again that there is reward for and consequences for not paying attention to detail. Yeshua instructs not to be deceived in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, the Gospel of Mark 13, and the Gospel of Luke chapter 21. But let us go to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, verses 4 through 5 first. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, verse 4 reads, "And Yeshua answered and said unto them, Take heed, listen, that no man deceive you. Let no man deceive you." The Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, verse 5. "For many," he's telling you how they're going to do it. "For many shall come in my name, saying, oh yeah, I'm a disciple. I am the Messiah. I'm one of his servants. Many shall come in my name saying, I am the Messiah. I am Christ, and shall deceive many." In this passage of scripture, Yeshua not only warns his disciples, he tells them how the deception shall come. Let us go now to the Gospel of Luke chapter 21, verse 8. It reads, "And he," Yeshua, speaking of Yeshua, "said, Take heed that ye be not deceived." Don't be deceived. "For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, Christ. And the time draweth near." So it's happening. "Go ye not therefore after them." Don't let them lead you astray. In this passage of scripture, Yeshua warns his disciples and even tells them that the deception is at hand. He even warns them again not to go after the deception. There are several other scriptures that instruct and warn the ecclesia, the called out ones, not to be deceived. As we've called out several times previously, the scripture always provides clear, concise, succinct instructions and guidance. Understanding this, let us heed the warnings and instructions given in the scripture of not being deceived. Let us pay close attention to details. Remembering the definition of the word detail: extended, prolonged treatment and handling of the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim. And attention to applying our minds, focusing constantly, meditating on the commandments and instructions of Yahweh Elohim. Let us all fully understand the importance of paying attention to details. I would like to invite you to continue to fellowship and worship the Sabbath with the Ecclesia next Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In addition, please join the Ecclesia every Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for prayer. The link for both is provided on his servant's website. Something to think about. If you are seeking a blessing, be a blessing. If this message of something to think about has been a blessing, assist us with your time, your talents, and finances, and continue to grow and move from just knowing to truly understanding the word of the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. Peace and blessings.
His servant encourages you and prays that you will continue with him on the journey of growing and moving from just knowing to understanding the word of the Most High Yahweh Elohim. To support you on your journey, his servant offers the following resources: his servant email address. Please feel free to reach out to his servant at any time with any questions, concerns, suggestions, and/or comments. His servant website and his servant YouTube channel. You are encouraged to subscribe to be alerted of new content. In addition, his servant recommends reading or listening to the beginning of Scriptural Truth, Volume 1. It affords a strong beginning foundation in not just knowing, but understanding the Scripture.